Good morning, students. Today, I'm going to explain the chapter Voice from your grammar lessons. First, children, I'm going to explain the definition of active voice. The active voice is a style of writing where the subject completes the action of the sentence. Example, Lexi mows the lawn. In this particular sentence, Lexi, who is the subject of the sentence, completes the action of mowing the lawn. Therefore, this is written in the active voice. A passive construction occurs when you make the object of an action into the subject of a sentence. Example, the metropolis has been scorched by the dragon's fiery breath. The subject in the active voice moves to the object position in the passive and is called the agent. The active verb is replaced with the passive verb. Now, children, what is the object of a sentence? The object of a sentence is the person or thing that receives the action of the verb. It is the who or what that the subject does something to. That sounds complicated, but we'll understand. It's more after we practice. Take the example of the sentence, Terry carried out the trash. In this sentence, Terry is the subject. It is the one performing the action and the one the sentence is about. Carried is the verb. It is the action being performed by the subject. Terry carried out the trash. So what is the verb of Terry? That is carried. Trash is the object. It is the what is being carried and it is what the subject is doing something to. Some sentences in the active void have two objects. The indirect object of a verb receives the direct object. In effect, the action moves from the subject through the verb to the direct object and then the indirect object. Example, Sue passed and the ball. Here, Sue is the subject, passed is the verb, and is the indirect object, and the ball is the direct object. Now, children, there are some exceptions to this rule. Passives can be formed from most of the transitive verbs that take an object. Now, children, what are transitive verbs? Transitive verbs are those verbs which has an object. Now, certain uses of have and like, be, appear, arrive, go, fall, happen, and wait do not take an object. Passives are not possible in these cases. The main verb in the sentence is the one that takes the active or passive form. Sometimes the agent, that is the person who does the action, is left out because it would be stating the obvious or the information is not needed. Sometimes the speaker or writer does not want to focus on the agent or the agent is not known. Take the example of the first sentence, those statues must have been sculpted many years ago. So, in this particular sentence, it is obvious that statues were built by humans. So, here the information is that is the agent is not mentioned. Okay, the island was uninhabited by humans, the window pane is broken, are some other examples. By is used to introduce the agent in most passive sentences. Example, a strange discovery was made by us. With is used when the subject is an instrument, that is, the action takes place through it. Example, the tree was cut down with an axe. Now, children, we need to keep in mind some rules for change of question sentences into passive voice. For questions beginning with did, for interrogative sentences, the normal structure of active voice sentences is did followed by the subject, followed by the verb, and then the object. Example, did she cook the food? Which is in the active voice. Here, she is subject, cook is verb, and the food is object. While changing the sentence into passive, this structure becomes was or were followed by the subject, then the third form of the verb, then by and the agent, which is in the passive voice. Example, was the food cooked by her becomes in the passive voice. Here the food becomes subject in passive voice, cooked is the past participle of cook, and her is agent. Some more examples to clarify this are, did Shubham write the homework, which is in the active voice, changes to was the homework written by Shubham. Did Simran learn English is in the active voice, was English learned by Simran changes into the passive voice. Question sentences which begins with was or were follows the subject, then the verb and ing followed by the object in active voice. Example, was she cooking the food is in the active voice. Here, she is subject, cooking is verb and the food is object. While changing the sentence into passive, this structure becomes was or were followed by the subject, then being, and the third form of the verb by and agent. Example, was the food being cooked by her is in the passive voice. Here, the food becomes subject in passive voice, cooked, that is the past participle of cook, and her is agent, that is the doer. Some more examples to clarify this are, was Shubham writing the homework is in the active voice. Was the homework being written by Shubham is in the passive voice. Was Simran learning English is in the active voice. Was English being learned by Simran is in the passive voice. Question sentences beginning with have or has or had follows the subject and third form of the verb and then the object. Example, has she cooked the food is in the active voice. Here she is subject, cooked is the third form of the verb, that is the past participle of cook, and food is object. While changing this into passive voice, the structure should be has, has, have, has, and had, followed by the subject plus been, and then the third form of the verb, followed by and the agent. Example, has the food been cooked by her becomes in the passive voice. Here, the food becomes subject in passive voice. Cooked is the third form of cooked, which is the past participle of cook, and her is agent. Some more examples to clarify this are, has Shubham written the homework is in the active voice. Has the homework been written by Shubham is in the passive voice. Has Simran learnt English is in the active voice. Has English been learnt by Simran is in the passive voice. Negative sentences are converted into passive voice by retaining not in its normal position. For example, the baby was not hitting a toy changes into a toy was not being hit by the baby in its passive voice. This boy cannot lift the box changes into the box cannot be lifted by this boy in the passive voice.